Okay, I'm going to try some inks as something different for some special effects. So to start with, again, I take my paper down with some masking tape. It's low tack masking tape. So it's meant to not tear your paper when you remove it after you've done your work, and it gives you a lovely crisp border. You buy it from any hardware shop. Most painters use it to sort of seal off skirting boards so that you're not painting on your skirting boards if you don't want paint. Okay, so I'm just going to explore what happens with some of the mediums. I'm going to drop some colour. So to start with, you have to create a wash and just use I'm just using an ordinary household brush, but you can also buy the West Art Hake brushes, and they're quite nice. They've got a beautiful soft bristle, and you can buy them in different sizes. So I'll apply some clear water, see what happens. Okay, because we want some bleeds to happen. Put that to the side. Got some Ecoline inks in an ultramarine deep. So I'm going to play and drop that in before it dries. Might add a little bit more water actually, because we want quite a lot of water. We're working basically on wet here. Okay, so I'm just going to drop some colour. Oh yes, lovely. Wow. Love the way that it spreads. Add a bit more water to it. Allow it to do its thing. You can blow it if you want. Let it bleed. And then I might even add a little bit of Ecoline, and it's called Deep Green. Just to see what happens quickly before the paper absorbs. It's lovely, really nice colours. So what I call, when I'm teaching, these are analogous colours. They sit close together on the colour wheel. There's a little bit of contrast, but not a lot. Okay, and you may add some more water to it. Or what you can do is you can lift it slightly. I'll just put this away on the side and move it around a little bit, so it bleeds into areas. You might want to keep some of the white areas. I don't mind not having too much. See what happens to it by bleeding it around. And this is where you can add all sorts of different things to it. See what happens. Okay, I don't want to lose, create a totally flat color. I actually want to see a little bit more blue. So I might move some of this into here. And then maybe just drop some more blue into it. I'm going to use two colours. If you're a novice at this, you get quite excited. You want to use all the colours. You're better off being limited. So I often say just limit it to a cool colour palette or a warm colour palette. And while that's quite wet, I've got some, just pre-mixed up some acrylic paint, but you can get inks that have a metallic finish to them or a pearlized. So this is just Sonia's Fine Rich Gold, which I use. This one here, and all I've done is I've diluted it because I actually want it to run and react with the paint. So let's have a look at what happens. Okay, yeah, you're going to get different things. It's a matter of exploring the consistency of the paint. So sometimes it might be too runny and you won't be able to see the gold, and other times there's too much gold and it doesn't run. So it's a bit of trial and error, but it actually looks quite cool. That looks really nice actually. Just put some clear water here. These are just creating heaps of papers with textures, and just put them away. You might go back to them and print on them, or work back with a a fine tip pen that's a white or a silver. You just create, what you're creating is backgrounds. You can even do this on a canvas. It's quite a lot of fun. So I'm having a little bit of a pull happening here. What I might do is just use a little bit of tissue. I sometimes use toilet paper as well, which is what I've done, clean. Okay, so you just absorb it like that. Same with here, just like that, like that. Okay, see what happens. Okay. You can also use scrunched up paper or plastic if you want to create a little bit of a shape. So I'm just going to have a go at using a little bit of paper. I've got a little bit of this bubble wrap, which everybody likes to pop. I might just see what happens. And the bubble wrap gives you additional textures that you can use. It also creates a bubble. So if I don't move this at all now, I'm hoping that those bubbles won't pop and that you'll get a little bit of textural quality happening through there. So even with the gold, it's giving me some different areas to work with and add just some special effects in the actual artwork. And then you can get, say, the end of a thin brush and maybe work your way by spreading it if you want to, creating little pops, little fine line areas. Or you can just leave it. So you can see it's had a bit of a reaction. Looks quite nice with the gold. It complements the blue. You can do it with silver, or you can do it with copper. So this is mixing inks and acrylic paints, but diluted acrylic paints. Wait for it to dry. If you want, you can dry it with hairdryer. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to wait for it to dry and then see what happens with it. I probably won't work back into it. I don't want to. I just wanted to create a texture using some inks and using some acrylics and then see the reaction. Okay, I'm going to work back into the ink piece that I created now that it's dry. And as you can see, it's dried up quite light. Just taping it down so it doesn't move around. I'm using just a blue tape. It's called washi, which is what painters use when they're wanting to sort of seal off the skirting boards. Okay, so I initially, just reviewing what I did, I initially had a wash of different types of inks. No, not different types, so Ecoline inks, but I used different colours. And then I dropped some gold acrylic in there. And so what I was going to do is I'm going to show you how you can actually work back into things. So you can either paint back into it, but I'm going to try something a little bit different. I went and purchased some pens from a art shop, just to see what I can create with them, and they're quite a lot of fun. And I'll be drawing back into it. So because most of it is an analogous colour of blues and greens, which means they're cool colour palettes, and they're related to each other because they sit on the same side of the colour wheel if you're studying the colour wheel. Now the contrast is the gold, because the gold is a warmer colour. So I look at the images and I sort of try and see what emerges from all the blurbs, and sometimes it takes a little while, and other times I can see little faces or little icons and I bring them out as part of the drawing. And you can do this with anything if you want to do coloured pencil. So I decided I was going to use these gel pens. They're called dual metallic hybrid, and the ones I'm going to use are closest to the colours that I have. But to start with, I'm just going to draw what I can see. I chose these sparkly ones. There are ones that are matte because of the gold. Once it hits the page and it dries, it does leave that metallic finish. Now you can use some reference drawings if you want. It's entirely up to you, or you can just freehand draw, follow some of the lines, follow some of what we call little cauliflower marks and in the bleeds, and they make some interesting shapes and mark making. Okay, so I can see a bit of a gargoyle happening here, and there's another one up here. Well, if you don't want to do faces, you can just follow the lines and make it just all lines. But I try to encourage the students to have a look. If it's a cloudy day, often we'll take them outside and say, okay, let's see what we can see in clouds. Clouds often have mystical sort of shapes that emerge, and sometimes people can see things through them. And sometimes people just can't. I can't see what you're talking about. Perhaps it's because I'm visual. I have to see lots of things. Okay, I can see lots and lots of little faces emerging as I'm drawing. Just following some of the mark making. It's a beautiful pen. I haven't used one of these in a long time. Mostly the ones I use are these ones here, which are a uni ball, and they're fantastic. I love drawing with them. Often use them to write Christmas cards, and they've just got that lovely gold. It's almost a paint flowing off it. So I'll use a combination and see how I go. But I'm liking the metallic that you can see. Just creates a really lovely contrast. So I'm just going to use lines for now, just to see what happens. Then I'll work back into it. And maybe use the other gold pen. So I'm just following some of the lines that I can see that are created by the water. I'm seeing all these people emerging from what I'm drawing. And the beauty about this sort of thing is you can never really recreate the same thing again. Well, the only way you can create it is if you take it to a print shop, and I've done that, where people have really loved it. But because you can't control how it's going to bleed, some work and then others don't work, even if you use very similar techniques. And so, you know, most of them are quite original and quite a lot of fun. I mean, if you're into sort of floristry sort of images with flowers, and you want to make cards, I guess you can control how the bleeds are, or try and see where you can see, like for instance in here you could probably see some sort of flowers appearing, but I just can't see that at the moment. All I'm seeing is people everywhere, faces are just emerging, they're coming out of the different bleeds. Just by using your imagination. There we go. That was another, and then I can see a little face in here. Nose, cheek, mouth, forehead. Then a tiny sort of a bit of a skull. Sometimes just parts of faces appear, then disappear behind the cauliflower shape, and that's okay. There's an unusual one here, looks a bit like the Elephant Man. Tiny little skull. Could be my imagination going a bit crazy. I tend to read a lot of crime novels because that's what I like. And the last one I just read had a lot to do with death and skulls and all those sorts of things, and it was even the imagery on the front of the book. So perhaps I've been influenced by that. Okay, now I'm getting into more abstraction here. I'm just looking at shapes. I'm not concentrating. I'm trying to avoid doing too much of the face, because sometimes it's just lovely to follow those cauliflowers mark making that's happened. This is quite gold compared to the rich gold of the paint. The rich gold of the paint almost looks like copper. So I can see something happening here. It's actually quite nice. I'm liking what the gold is doing, and I'm loving it, the way it's drying up. It's leaving that almost tiny bits of glitter and just enhancing the work. So I'm like a little kid. I love bits of glitter in things sometimes. Not too much, but just the glitzy bits. So maybe go work into the blue, because the blue is a little bit darker, and therefore this gold will probably show up a little bit better. So just following the lines around. Okay, so I'm just going to switch over to a green just to see what it's like. Won't be as bright, but it might create something real. Ooh, it's interesting. It's very dark. Oh, yeah. So it's creating a little bit more of a darker outline. You can sort of follow the lines that you've already done, or for instance, I can see a face in there, so you might want to do a little bit of patterning for the hair. Create small patterns in the green. That's very interesting. And there's also a blue just over here. Just test them out. Yep. That's really dark too. I'm just following you, just the mark making where the colours are changing. And I'm not necessarily, you know, drawing a continuous line. I'm sort of sketching in some of the blue because the blue is actually quite dark in here. But it is drying up. That green's dried up a little bit lighter there, so I'm assuming that the blue will do exactly that too. Now you can reference, you know, some pictures if you want. Go in and have a look at some gargoyles. I'm just sort of playing with some stuff from my imagination, just letting my mind flow. I find this sort of thing quite therapeutic, especially after a hard day at work with students. I tend to give a lot of my creative energy to my students, and it's nice to come home and relax and do something that you enjoy. And it's all about having fun, playing with the stuff, not worrying too much about whether it's going to work or not. It's just exploring materials. Sometimes I like, you know, something doesn't work, I keep it. And then I might work back on it. Or I might just, you know, I might just take a section of that and think, I quite like that section, but I don't like the rest of it. And then I'll play with it digitally as well. Might photograph it, put it into Photoshop and change it up. And make some interesting special effects with it. It's great sometimes just creating designs like this and sending them off to textile artists who will create textile patterns and fabric patterns out of it and really make some really interesting things out of just mark making that somebody else has done. Okay, so I've just, you know, played with a bit of blue, introduced it in areas where I can see it bleeding through. Some of these lovely areas. I didn't want to get rid of that white. I quite like the contrast of a little bit of white, and could have tried to leave a little bit more, but sometimes just leaving it in one tiny section like this is a bit of a statement just up the top, draws your eye. It's a bit different. There's a little bit of white in here that is interesting as well. So as you can see the blue really coming out of the paper, and depending on what sort of mark making you want to create. I mean, if you want to cross hatch, you can cross hatch if you like. So I might sort of want to bring that eye out a bit, so I might just, you know, play with it a bit more. Make it a bit more sketchy. I quite like the loose lines. It can be the evil man. And I quite like this area in here. So generally, when you're looking at a composition, I used a different mark making. I sort of explored some, what I mentioned was cross hatching in here. So I might balance it. I might come down here and think, okay, well, I've got a little bit of cross-hatching happening there. How about I just do some cross-hatching around here as well? Don't necessarily have to do in blue. I've started it. All right. Okay, well, I might just get a little bit more green. If you wanted to do big areas, really bring things out, could. It is drying up lighter, which is interesting to see. Actually, the green and the blue look quite similar in colour. There's not much difference. But on white paper, it actually is remarkably different. It's because I'm applying it on the top of the green. So I've got the gold underneath there, but I will bring that out later. You might still play around with some shapes in here, follow some of the lovely gold. The gold does create a beautiful contrast. I love the gold, probably out of all the colours is quite nice. And I just bought these because I like the glitter and the blingly look. So, and I just thought, well, I'll just experiment simply because I had the colours. If you don't have any of these at home, you can even do it with, you know, a pencil. If you've got some coloured pencils, and maybe look at using some different colours. You might even go contrast, or even a white pencil if you've got one. Bit of a gargoyle happening in here. Don't know if you can see that coming out from the images, and there's another one in here. Maybe a nose, part of an ear. There is a face in there that's coming out, so I might just highlight it so you can see it. It's actually quite nice as a subtle, but just to bring it out a bit so you can see what I'm seeing. Might be a bit hard on the video. Some of these, they look like floral or organic shapes that you can sort of develop. There's another face in here, hiding. I guess if you look at the artist, Peter Booth, who's an Australian artist, he's got a particular painting, I forget the name of it, where he's got all these images that are extracted and sort of emerge, and he's hidden in one of those images. This was an interesting one. It almost has become a focal point. I can actually see sort sort of like a monkey come human dressed up in here. Okay, so might bring some green in here just to show the difference, because when I look at the blue here and I look at the greenish here and the blue, they're quite similar, but when you go into here you can see the difference of the blue and the green, and it's subtle differences, but it actually looks really nice. Lovely. You're probably thinking I'm just scribbling. I sort of am, but I'm following marks that were left behind by the bleeds, like this thing here. There's a line, we call these little cauliflowers. A lot of watercolour artists don't like the cauliflowers. They tend to blend them out. I think they add a really interesting point. Okay, a bit of a face in there. Becoming a bit more human, not very happy. Okay, you can sort of see a part of the skull in there. And there's a lady in here. Just outline her a bit. And her lips so that you can see where she is in here. Now I might decide not to bring her out in a bit more gold. And where I have the gold areas, there's nothing sort of shaping them into some sort of flowers. They don't have to be flowers that exist in, you can just make them up, make them quite surreal. And again, you know, if you need some referencing, you can do that. So you can continue for quite some time just building the areas up. So I might decide, okay, I quite like that area and I'm going to make that a solid colour. And then I'll need to find, see that's quite becoming a focal point because it's intense and it's a solid colour and it's changing it. So what I might do, I've got some down here, and just to balance it, I often work with threes. So I've got one here, and I probably need something either up here or over here. I might do one here. This is an eye. 2 eyes, okay. So, okay. All right. So now I'm going to go around all the gold areas like that. They look like little blobs of gold. They look like little blooms of flowers appearing. Well, that's what they look like to me. They may not be the same for others. So saw another person in there. These people are merging everywhere. Every time I look at something, I can see a person appearing even in here. These little faces. That's emerged now. This thing here looks like a bit of a ram. So I might put that in. It's quite interesting, and I might even fill that whole area in green. Looks interesting. Okay, so that appeared just then. Okay, so I think this is a bit too contrived here. I'll just soften it up a little bit. I might go back into it with some gold. Now poppy in here. The trouble with this sort of thing is you can never stop. It's just go on and on and on, and you think, oh, when am I going to be finished? And then something, you overwork it. You think, oh, should have left it like it was. Okay, so there's another person in here which I saw before. I'm going to bring it out a little bit more. As you can see. Okay, an eye, forehead, and a bit of the hair up here. Okay, we've got an area in here that looks like it's a bit of a flower. This is an interesting one. You can really see it because it's the head, the nose, the ear, the neck, the shoulder. It's got a bit of a flower. And then this abstract type of body. You could possibly put in an arm if you wanted to. This could be her hand. But also I've got an elephant happening here, which is, I'll put another one of those dots. So they're happening over the place. And they're drawing your eye around the composition. So this has been really creative. Great to do with anybody, you know. But people do find it daunting because often people say, I can't see things, and I'll sort of try and explain. But everybody sees different things, and it's okay. You don't have to see what I see. So it's just interesting what emerges from virtually a blob of paint that bleeds. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to use this one here, one of my favourite pens. And I might just add a little bit more gold to areas. Just enhance it. Just some solid areas. See, now these are starting to look like birds to me, or a rabbit. This is like a duck. It's not a flower. So, you know, different things keep emerging from this. So I'm going to bring out some of this gold. We know these are sort of flowers, abstractions of flowers. So I'll bring it out with this one. And this is a slightly different gold to the paint. Now, you know, you might think, well, I put the paint underneath, but the paint and the bleeds were all an experiment. I wanted to have a look at what would happen. I was always going to work back into it. That's the intention. You know, the book I'm looking at, which is Art Effects for Special Effects, the artist and the author who writes about the different art techniques and it talks to artists doesn't necessarily go to the extent where they're working back. But this is just an add-on to what I did yesterday, and I had to wait for the bleed to dry. Now, if you like the bleed just as is, it's fantastic. Okay, so this lady had flowers. I can see she's got a nose. I can see she's got a mouth. Might want to bring her out here as a bit wonky, but it doesn't matter. She's got another eye there. Yeah, you can see like so. Another eye. Okay. So that gold's actually really popping and standing out. I can see a big difference in the gold, which is really nice. It's lovely. It's quite solid. And the beauty about the these Uniball pens is that the ink flows really well out of them, and you can design with them more so than the other ones I had. But the other ones was a slightly sort of a light gold, but it leaves a little bit of a glittery effect at the end. Now I can see here another person, and that's just evolved. I did not see that before. So I'm going to colour that in like so, just see what happens. Like somebody wearing a crown over here, and then you've got the head, the nose, the big witchy poo chin, and the eyes, and just wearing some sort of a cloak. I can even like do hair like that. And this is like a cloak down here. There's a bit of gold. You can dot it. Oh, the dots look great. Okay, so just grab the blue one just to bring that out a bit more so you can see the facial features. I mean, maybe that can be the hair. You might be able to even, you know, draw it in quite solid there. So that just sort of came out while I was using the gold. I didn't see it before. Do a bit of dotting with this, just creates another texture. So you might want to follow some of the existing lines that you've already made. It's just creating. You probably can't see it because it's so microscopically small, but I can. So some of the glitter is tiny, tiny little dots, and you can just accentuate by going over the top or next to it with the Uniball pen. So this one here, I might add a little bit of gold on it because I think I overdid the blue a bit just to soften it. Yep, it's working quite nicely. So that's the mouth and the chin. And the ram up here. Maybe put some dots in here just to balance up the techniques that I've been using. So you can use any type of mark making you like. I've used crosshatch, I've used lines, dots. This looks like it should be some sort of a jewel. Oh, she's got ears here, doesn't matter. Maybe to her hair. Haven't got a knot here. Okay. Not sure if I like that, but if you don't like it, wait for it to dry and then go over the top of it. So there's some other areas in here. So I might decide just to do lines now, see what happens. Just faint lines. And sometimes if you hold your pen further away from the actual silver bit, you have less control. Well, that's a good thing too. It's not contrived. You don't actually want it to be contrived. You want it to sort of flow freely. So I might just put a bit of, bring that out a bit. Let's see a bit of a line there. Okay, there's quite a lot of gold in this. I don't know, in this particular person that's emerging from the bleeds. So if you want to work back into it, you can with a little bit of the green. So you can dot using green. We can even cross hatch certain areas, making it evident in here. So there's some faces emerging. This face in here is particularly interesting, that's come out. I'm going to leave that as it is. You can go in and shade underneath the petals of the flowers if you wish, just to create a bit more depth in there, in here. I haven't tried it actually with a brush. What I might do is I might just, I'm not sure if these are waterproof or not. Oh, they're not. Isn't that great? So I can actually push some of that around, you know, if I want to, and it will bleed into other areas, which is interesting. And just bleed it in and bleed it in. You can see it just subtle. So I might just push that out there. It has a bit of pigment, might make that area a little bit dark, and then bring him out around the face. So just by that little experiment there, I can see that the actual ink bleeds, which is good. I don't think, just have a quick, oh, so do the uni ball. So these are all waterproof, which is really good, because that means that if you wanted to draw and paint with them, you can. So I can do a bit of a wash and then apply things, but I'm not going to do that with this. I actually want to work with it as a pen, because I want to show you that the things that you can do just using pens after you've worked back into an area and you've created a wash of colour. Okay, so there's another image emerging there. Bit of gold in here. Sort of flit around the place to try and balance up my gold in areas, because the gold is definitely the contrasting colour that's here at the moment. Don't want to add too many other colours. These pens come in all sorts of different colours. I've even got a white one here and I've got a silver one here, but I don't want to introduce those colours, otherwise it gets too much. If you're teaching this for the first time to people who have not done it, they often want to use all the colours and think, oh, I use too many colours. But that's okay. That's just natural that you get excited about something and want to use all the colours. It's best when you start off, just to start off with a limited colour palette, and that's why I like doing little landscapes, just using one or two colours, not lots of colours. And then you can just build on them slowly. And also just use analogous colours that are related. Just makes it less complicated and quite interesting. Less is best, as the old saying goes. Okay, so there we go. Go back to some green. And you might want to fill in some areas. I'm going to try and fill in some areas just over here, just to see. So just diagonal use of line to fill in areas. I might want to make it really quite dark behind the person's back here that's emerged. Maybe even in here. Okay, and in here. Might be interesting to do that. Okay. That's drying up quite nicely. So I'm going to try and balance it up on this side too. I might just do some in here. Maybe in here. So behind the flowers. Maybe in here, just some solid areas. In the eye, around, in the ear. Okay, this will dry up differently than what you can see. This one needs a bit of work. This one here too. I'm seeing here I don't have a lot of gold, so I might put quite a solid bit of gold in here just to balance it diagonally across my design. Anyway, I could work for hours on this. I'm not going to. I'm actually going to stop. I'm just going to show you what you can actually do by using all of these pens. So the pens are your Uniball, which are really lovely pens to use. And these new ones, which I haven't had before, they're called Hybrid Dual Metallics. You can buy them from any stationery shop. And they've come in an array of colours. I also bought a white, but I'm not going to introduce the white. I could possibly, if I wanted to, you know, add some more of this white. Like, for instance, I might try it just to show you. It's actually quite a flat colour. So it's like putting liquid paper on your page. So you wait for it to dry. And you can, you know, draw back in areas if you wish. So I've got that lightness there, and you might decide to put a little bit of white in here. Actually, now I wasn't going to use it, and see now I got carried away. I'm using it again. So you might decide I kind of like that. That looks cool. Okay, so you might want to bring some eyes out, and you might just use it in those areas. If you don't like it, just rub it back. So it's mainly not so much eyes, but maybe some of these areas in here that I've painted. And I might decide, okay, I might just bring that out, make that white so it balances out with some of the white that you can see in there. So you might want to do a little, maybe an area in here that's a little bit white, bring it out like so, like so. Okay, that looks a bit contrived. Anyway, I could stop in here. Look, it's better on the paint. I just put some on the metallic pen, other colours, and it sort of picks it up, makes it a lighter version of that colour. Okay, so you've got some interesting things happening there, and you can go back with white, but I quite like it the way it is. And as I said, you know, you can continue working on it for a long time. It's only a small piece. It's a lot of fun. Keep working on it. If you want, you can reference, as I said before. And I'm just going to have a look at what happens if I was to, you know, I always use the little frames or these viewfinders. I often find some really, you know, interesting effects that take place, or you might even go diagonally across and see what you can find. That looks kind of nice. That's a little bit more balanced in its color choices. All right, whereas I quite like this because there's a little bit of a contrast in the top left-hand corner down here. So I can bring it up a little bit like so. And it makes a really interesting composition just to have the white on that side with a tiny little bit here and there. So you can use those, and that could be a little study piece that you might create a painting from later on. So if you've liked this section on working with inks and washes and pens, give us a like, and I really appreciate any comments as well. I'm only learning and I'm having a lot of fun with this. So thank you.